Hello everyone, welcome to the QuesterMage and welcome back to another PlayStation 2 video. In today's video, I want to specifically talk about Dragon's Lair 3D on a PAL PlayStation 2. Yet another classic game remade in 3D that I had no idea existed for the PlayStation 2. So I was very happy to buy this game and see if it is indeed any good. The back of the box says this is an all-new adventure with true control of Dirk the Daring. The game has over 250 rooms to complete with traps and puzzles and combat and unlockables. As usual in these videos, I want to go through things I liked, things I disliked, what I changed, and my overall thoughts on the game. So let's start off with things that I liked. The first thing that stood out to me is what a great adaptation of essentially a 2D QuickTime event game into a 3D platformer. And yes, this is a full 3D platformer, which was very surprising in a good way. Overall, the graphics look actually good, even though the game is slightly low resolution and the outlines of the cel-shaded characters shimmer a little bit. There are power-ups in this game which I really like, and it changes up the gameplay. Like I just said, it is a full 3D game, and that's not what I expected here. I expected to play the original Dragon's Lair just in 3D. Here, you are literally the character Dirk the Daring going into the castle to save Princess Daphne in a 3D adventure, and that's just great. You need to complete every single room to get to save Princess Daphne. Speaking of the individual rooms, the back of the box says there are over 250. And the room design in this game is really good. Every room does feel slightly different. You have different sizes, different activities you can do in each room as well. Surprisingly, you have the option to change the game from a 4:3 ratio to 16:9. There are power-ups throughout your gameplay, but you also have collectibles and unlockables. And I'm also glad to see a lock-on mechanic too. A very surprising addition that I liked is you have a first-person camera so you can look around to see what you need to do per room to complete the puzzle and move on to the next one. Also, another thing that I liked are there are no max lives or continues. You can lose as much as you like in this game and you will keep on going. And let me tell you, you are going to lose in this game. Whether it's the game's fault or your fault, you are going to get used to losing a lot in this game. Well, at least I got used to losing a lot in this game. I don't know if it's because it is Dragon's Lair, but the whole 3D element really does come together and work really well here. So let's move on to things that I disliked. Luckily, not many points in the things that I disliked. The first thing that I definitely noticed, there is inconsistent jumping in this game. As an example, I'm going to show you here on screen. To resolve specific rooms, you will need to jump on top of things like bookcases in this room to collect that chalice over there. I managed to jump directly and collect that chalice. But there is another way of doing this, and if you don't want to do that, I'm going to put a spoiler warning on the screen so that it doesn't spoil anything for this room, and then once that spoiler warning disappears, I have stopped talking about it. So 3, 2, 1. To collect that chalice, you have to jump on top of the bookshelf and then hit a torch, which will then reactivate the floor and allow you to run across and collect the treasure. So for those of you that didn't want to be spoiled on how to collect that treasure, welcome back. I'm not going to talk about how to do that again, but generally there are some platforming issues in this game when it comes to jumping, and that was the bookshelf, but there are other situations that I found difficult to navigate because of the jumping. There are two types of jumps in this game. There is a vertical jump where you just go up, and there is a forward propelling jump. But sometimes this jump is quite inconsistent. I've noticed that sometimes I jump much farther than I usually do, or than I should be able to do, as I will show you here. In this room, I'm supposed to use the chains here to jump to the other side, but you can see I actually managed to jump directly to the other side. And I don't think I was supposed to do that, but hey, it did work. And as we're speaking about jumping and the inconsistency of jumping, there is another thing that comes to mind, which is you have to sheath your sword to do any form of jumping in this game. Now that is absolutely fine, it's a limitation of the game, and it's a purposeful one, so the game does tell you you cannot do this, if you read the little subtitles that is, but you will find, as you play the game, this will become an annoyance. In this room, for example, there are chains here that I want to get to. Totally forgot that I had my sword unsheathed, and I've done this again and again. Eventually getting to a point where I remembered And then I thought, aha, I know what the problem is. We just have to unequip the sword, and I'm going to go straight to those chains, and then I jump onto the chain, and I fall down the chasm anyway, and I have to do it again. So these ropes and chains sometimes are a little bit finicky, and that's something I do not like. Not game breaking by any means, but it was pretty annoying. It does seem like the character jumping onto an object that you should be able to climb sometimes doesn't work properly. Lastly, in the things that I disliked are if enemies hit Dirk while you are on a rope or a chain, you will fall off. Now, I don't mind games being difficult. I like difficult games that are fun, and I like challenge in games. Those are definitely things that I look forward to whilst playing. But here, when Dirk is dangling from a rope or from a chain, and you have an enemy that can get you from the far, it does seem a little bit cheap on the developer side to allow the enemies to attack you from the far, and then you just fall and it resets the room and you have to do everything again. Not a massive problem, but it's definitely something that I disliked. So moving on from the things I liked and disliked, what would I change in this game? Well, the first thing that I'd like to change is how you move Dirk the Daring. Now, he makes what seems to me like very big steps as you're walking through the game, and as it's a platformer, I think that is something that I would change. You can walk in the game, which is fantastic, but I would still change how the character moves and how much space the character feet would take up as you are moving. Another thing that I would do is a short hop. I would add a little short hop to the game, maybe a double tap or something like that of the jump button to allow the character to just jump forward quickly. Another thing that I would change is jumping with the sword equipped. I would definitely add that to the game. I think that would just make it much easier to play and less annoying at times, even though it's, again, not a massive problem. But I think as less of an annoyance, I would add that ability into the game. Also, items like keys. If the sword is equipped, you cannot use them. So that's something else that I would change. I'd like to be able to use the items that you have. And for some reason, he can't if he's equipped his sword, which to me is just weird. Next would be constantly running into walls. You're going to be doing this a lot. As you're running around a corner, you're just going to see Dirk the Daring bounce off a wall for no reason. It seems like this is way too frequent. I like the animation. I like the fact that it's in the game. But again, happens too often. I would look at the object detection between the character himself and the walls and see if we could just scale that down a little bit. Next would be the controls. There are 4 options for controls in this game, which you can change what button does what. But I would have preferred button mapping. Now, for me, it's fine. I don't mind the mapping of the buttons themselves, but I can see some people getting a little bit annoyed that X button doesn't do this and Y button doesn't do that, and that could just be alleviated by adding in button mapping. Now, I am talking about the PAL version of this game, and one of the things that I would change is allow the game to run at 60 Hz. Because the game runs at 50 Hz, as most PAL version games do, and what a shame. It would have been lovely to run this game at 60 Hz. Like I said earlier, it does run in 4:3 or 16:9, but no 60 Hz here. Unfortunate, I would have definitely changed that. Lastly, here in things that I change would be once you collect all the treasures, a shame that the original game isn't here to play. Now, the original game isn't very long, so it would have been a lovely addition to add it, but unfortunately they didn't. So that's something else that I would change. I think I would definitely reward the player for collecting all the treasures. You do get rewarded. There are unlockables in the game. But I do think the reward for unlocking every treasure in the game should have been the original being unlocked and playable on the PlayStation 2. So those are things that I liked, disliked, and some of the things that I would change. But what are my overall thoughts on Dragon's Lair 3D? So the first thing that I noticed is this game seems to have more than one name. Now, in the PAL region, this game is called Dragon's Lair 3D Special Edition, but in a form of a trek mode in the game, it calls itself Dragon's Lair 3D Return to the Lair. I also noticed that there's a splash screen that just says Dragon's Lair 3D. So a little bit confusing as to why there are 3 different names for this game. But I'm assuming, again, this is because of different regions. The game overall did surprise me in a very good way. I did not expect to be carrying items to pedestals in this game. I didn't really expect combat or platforming or puzzle rooms. I just expected a few rooms with some very light platforming and a lot of repetition. But I am very pleasantly surprised that this is a full 3D Dragon's Lair experience. So the name of the game, yes, it does say Dragon's Lair 3D, but sometimes you don't expect to play Dragon's Lair in in 3D, like I was saying, you expect a facsimile of, but here you are playing Dragon's Lair in 3D. It's a good game and it's really fun to play. The controls maybe need a little bit of tweaking to make this a great platformer, but overall a good job in adapting the original game into 3D on the PlayStation 2. I think the developers did want players to get stuck, to look around the room, to find out what to do, and to find out if there are any collectibles, and if there are, it's now more difficult to complete this room. You will lose playing this game, and I think this should be expected because the original was the same. You lost a lot playing the original. Some treasures are really well hidden and difficult to get. The walk button is important, like I said earlier. Don't forget to use it. There are some cheap moments definitely in the game, and I think this is consistent with the original. So somewhat acceptable to have moments like that. I always wanted to have another go after losing, and it rarely felt like the game was being unfair. Now there are moments like I mentioned in the things that I disliked with the chains and the ropes, and I don't like them and they shouldn't be there, but that is a very small portion of the game that I felt was unfair. But even though I would change them, I don't hate them. They're just annoying. The collectibles are a very nice addition to allow for longevity as you're playing the game. The combat is not the best. I usually spam the square button, but this does allow for fun moments and it generally does work. Platforming works as you would expect it to in this era of gaming. The developer did, I think, a good job in creating rooms within the castle to keep me busy and doing various activities. I really like this room, for example. See what I'm doing here? I'm standing right here and the lights are flowing from the enemy to the player, and now we have to figure out where to step and not get hurt. I very much enjoyed this room. It is really fun. Which reminds me, I did find myself constantly wanting to complete a room to see the next room, and I do think that was planned by the developers. Playing Dragon's Lair in 3D is something I wouldn't have thought would be as good as it is. Like I said, I'm really surprised about how much I like this game. Is it perfect? No. But is it fun? Yes. And the PS2 is great with stuff like this. There are classic games that have 3D adaptations that I didn't know existed and ended up liking quite a lot for this console. I've made videos on Golden Axe 3D, Outrun 3D, Space Invaders Anniversary, in which you can play a Space Invaders in 3D too. These games actually all play really well, and I'm very happy that they exist. They show that it is possible to reimagine classic games in 3D and be fun. Are these the best versions of these games? Well, no. But they are really good, fun to play, and much more than just a novelty. At least for me. I think the developer's done a great job with Dragon's Lair 3D, and it's another game that I didn't know existed, but I am very, very happy to have in my collection. Now, what do you think of Dragon's Lair 3D, the special edition, or Return to the Lair, or just Dragon's Lair 3D on the PlayStation 2? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? How would you change it? Please let me know down in the comment section, and let's have a discussion about it. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you very much again for watching. If you like what I do here, please click that like button down below. Helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to see more, please click that subscribe button, as that is the only way this channel can grow. Now, I hope you liked this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, thanks again.